Hey, SVGers, welcome back for another edition of the SVG News Sponsor Spotlight. We've got an exciting edition of it for you here today. We're going to talk a little bit about a company that's more been specializing in the world of marketing, advertising, and the digital first world, really making impact now in the broadcasting, not
Yeah.
just of live sports, but live entertainment in general. They are our new friends at Media.Monks. We're joined by Lewis Smithingham. He's their SVP of Innovation and Creative Solutions. Lewis, thanks so much for taking the time. How you doing, sir? Good to see you.
Hey, great to see you too. Really excited to be here. It's such an interesting space for us to be in.
Yeah, you guys are doing some really cool stuff and have been for a little while. I was joking to some of my colleagues where I was like, "Oh, I've met Lewis before, but it was in a virtual VR environment during the pandemic, and we had avatars. So I don't know if that counts as meeting someone. And maybe in
It counts.
2020, it certainly did. But could you tell us a little bit about the company, what you guys specialize in? Might be a bit of a new concept to some of the old school heads here at an
Absolutely.
organization like SVG. But give us a lowdown on what Media Monks is all
Yeah, I
about.
mean, we're a digital first company. We're
Mhm.
a company that builds marketing services, engagement services, technology services, consulting services, a wide range of different ways. Our founder, Wesley Tahar, likes to describe us as a glass to glass company. We're
Mhm.
a company that captures content and innovation and then distributes it all over the world. Where we were founded in Amsterdam, or actually in Hilversum, which is just outside of Amsterdam. I think it's 20 plus years ago. We're 8,000 people now. Sir Martin Sorrell acquired Media Monks in 2018 and founded S4 Capital along with a couple of other acquisitions. I came up through, I was hired in 2020. I had all these awesome KPIs to build a live broadcast team, had this great, gorgeous deck of the $20 million we were going to spend buying 4K trucks and all this cool stuff. And then obviously March of 2020 hit, and I started sort of thinking about job opportunities. And a friend of mine, Jason O'Malley, who's now over at AWS, sent a link to this article in SVG that had the signal flow that Riot Games was doing in the cloud, and it had this thing called Nimble and this program called vMix that I'd never heard of before at the time, and like
Right.
all these other different tools that I mean, I was used to. Look, I came up as an assistant editor.
Mhm.
I learned on Avid, and a program prior to Avid, even a Lightwave was what it was called. The RIP on that. Anyway, the point is like never heard of this stuff, and we're like, wow, well, like guess we got to figure this out, right? And so, and then a couple days later, like literally a couple days later, we got a call from a major client saying, "Hey, man, can you broadcast the NBA in VR from the bubble, 4K, 60 frames a second? Oh, and you can only have like three people there." And we sort of had to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? Which candidly was really hard. It wasn't like there was 57 years of history and schooling and experience on these things. And we've grown from that point to be within our broadcast systems. And obviously, we do services across sports, whether it's doing large scale marketing activations for different teams, partnering with different leagues. Um, but from our broadcast in particular, we've grown from that single start to this much larger piece where we've brought on quite a few team members all over the world. And I think we've innovated into this business practice where focusing on digital first, cloud first, and frankly, software defined has defined our business practices and has allowed us to grow and engage with our global model. You know, I started out saying we're 8,000 people. We're also in, I'll probably mess up this count, but it's something like 37 different countries globally.
Mhm.
The team that I work with for our broadcasts is distributed from Nottingham, England, North Carolina, New York, Los Angeles, Orlando, Florida, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, South Africa, Amsterdam, all different talent all over the world. And it's been interesting over the past 4 years watching the industry change and watching how our approach is. It's again, like you said, I don't think the idea of being an SVG 4 years ago seemed wild. But at the same time, when we were starting out in VR 8, 9 years ago, the idea of being an American cinematographer was insane as well. But
Sure.
it happened. And I think that's a nod to how the industry is changing.
Yeah, and I'd love to get a little bit more about kind of the advantages that you guys have in being a digital first company when it comes to that stuff. But I want to get a couple of projects you guys are
Yeah.
working on for the context for the audience. You mentioned the NBA. I had the opportunity to experience that VR, the NBA in VR a few times. I know a lot of people probably have. It's very cool. Whether it's that or maybe a couple other projects you guys are working on, what are some things that you guys are heavily involved in, sports community or not?
Yeah, so we work primarily in different types of broadcasts. Like it's not your traditional TV broadcasting. The audiences that we engage with are primarily digital audiences.
Mhm.
So we're working on using new tools to deliver to audiences on the platforms where they are, particularly younger audiences as well. For example, one piece we're working on right now. So we found that from a PwC study that Gen Z consumes more highlights than actual live broadcasts. And we thought, okay, that's really interesting. We work with the social media platforms. And so we started looking at how we could design custom highlight systems that deliver highlights to what fans want. So we started building a fan focused highlight system. We're working with UNC on that. The idea being that with targeting and frankly with the sort of data we have on fans as they're watching, there's huge opportunities to deliver at scale. You think about the number of sneakerheads that could be watching March Madness,
Mhm.
and then let's take it a step further. March is peak allergy season in the United States. How many people watching March Madness or watching the NBA or basketball or sports in general during that period of time are sneakerheads also suffering from seasonal allergies? So that gives us an opportunity to create sponsorship that we would have never really thought before, but also has a better, frankly, higher value because of the fact that it's targeted. But then you can take that even further and start looking at how fans are defined in this day and age. I think I live in Raleigh, which is a city that's made so much of transplants at this point in time, and
Mhm.
most of my neighbors are from New Jersey, and it's this sort of thing. I think broadcasters have prior to now just thought of fans as home and away. There are two
Sure.
types of people, and they're defined based upon where they are in space rather than who they are. And we take our systems and bring affinity data in and start looking at fans from an affinity perspective. So, looking at how those affinity perspectives would actually change replays and change highlights and change the way the broadcast could be. You start thinking about, so again, I'm a metalhead as well. So, what's it like to hear the metalhead commentary on a game on top of the traditional game? How
Sure.
is that define who you are as a fan? And that's what we're looking at, particularly because we're digital focused. We're looking at how we deliver to fans on multiple platforms. When I started my career, we started out delivering to maybe two formats at
Mhm.
best,
Okay.
usually just one, to be totally honest. And now our average delivery count is upwards of 27. We've been working a lot in VR. Our team specializes in really, really large format work. So doing broadcasts at 8K, uncompressed RAW. We work with Red around that, doing large scale. We've done a number of shows like that. We're about to start an NBA season with Meta again, broadcasting this year at 8K, which was a total entire rethink of the workflow. The first we've ever done of a workflow like this, and I think probably the first time that somebody's doing that large scale intensive workflow night after night after night. It's crazy, to bring together what is effectively six almost a science project of workflows building together and broadcasting. We work on that. Lots of concert series in VR, concert series for other platforms. We do a lot of branded launches. We look at how live streaming, and this is a core aspect, and this came to fore in the pandemic. Live streams, and particularly multi-platform live streams, offer brands and rights holders an opportunity to interact with their fans in a way that static content just never can.
Mhm. So, how do you guys, in terms of production specifically, you guys being a digital first company, have certain advantages that you kind of come to? It's like, sometimes we even stop and think, and it's like, how would we do things differently if we were starting from zero today? There's a lot of things in broadcast and in infrastructure that are just done because they've always been done that way. So, with viewership changing, whether that's in image quality, like you're talking about with 8K, or more interactivity, or maybe wanting less of the full game in its entirety, I guess, in what way are you guys positioned to bring kind of a fresh, unique approach to the production side of sports?
Well, part of what we look into as and frankly what makes us unique is the fact that when we broadcast, we're broadcasting to platforms that are often inherently unique or
Mhm.
inherently interactive, I mean. And in the sense that a lot of the platforms like the NBA and VR, for example, when we broadcast, that the way you broadcast is not necessarily exactly the same as TV. It's about how you experience the physicality of that broadcast. So you have to take all sorts of things into account as you're bringing that to fore. The other aspects from a just straight production perspective, as a company that's, we don't have a parking lot in Secaucus full of trucks.
Right.
As a company that's firmly, frankly, gone from copper to cloud, and frankly, we're never copper. So like
Mhm.
just to cloud right out of the gates, it gives us a real opportunity to bring talent to fore rather than just who can sit in a seat in a city. And so we have some of the best and some, it's again, I think about it, it's a bit grandiose, but I think about it sort of like being like some sort of Marvel supervillain where I've assembled the perfect team from all over the world to be able to work on these projects. It also provides massive opportunities for cost cutting from a client perspective when you're not having to have massive teams on site. It used to be, and I've almost broadcast the Super Bowl at this point 3 or 4 times,
Mhm.
and all prior to working at Media.Monks, it would get killed because we'd be brought on as a marketing activation at the last minute, and there wouldn't be enough porta potties. Because we had to bring on a giant physical prem, or there's not,
No.
enough truck space. And with that, like our broadcast rigs, you've seen them. They're what, the size of a washing machine. They're little gator cases, and they take the power. They take a normal outlet. Like this isn't a crazy power hungry giant machine that needs 3 generators to power it up. We connect. We partner with companies like the Switch to connect to network and engage on the cloud. And that allows us to have all sorts of layers of redundancy. You can't, we joke, some of our physical shows that we've had, of them, several have had cables cut by things like snowplows.
Mm.
There aren't any snowplows in the cloud in this case. And then to top it off, we've won awards for this. We sort of unintentionally became banner holders for sustainability in broadcasting. Media.Monks and S4 was the first agency to sign the climate pledge, but we didn't set up this broadcast system with the exact intention of being sustainable. But we had we had an interesting moment where we got a call from a team member being like, "Hey, have you actually like looked into what our carbon footprint is?" No, what? I didn't know we could do that. And there's a calculator. AWS had a calculator. All the cloud companies have a calculator. It tells you how much carbon you're running. And so that time, this is like peak busy season.
Mhm.
We had done like 7 or 8 games, and this is 4K, 60 frames a second, full graphics, full replays. You're recording ISOs at like full res. Like this is what would be a 83-foot thing, something,
Sure.
a very large truck. And we I'm laughing because I know some engineer on my team is going to correct me and say I mentioned the wrong length of truck at this point. I'm sorry, Patrick. Um, but to that end, like, so that whole system generated zero point 0.7 metric tons of carbon in a month, which is effectively a rounding error
Mhm.
and is less than a one-way flight from New York to Los Angeles. A round trip flight from New York to Los Angeles would be 6 times that amount. And that's just the production equipment. Then
Mhm.
you take into account that instead of flying between 10 and 26 people all over the country for an entire season, you're flying 2 or 3 people,
Sure.
if that. The reduction gets crazy. And it wasn't necessarily something that we again, I think we sort of lucked into this, but it's something
Sure.
we're
Right,
extremely
right.
proud about.
Yeah, it's important.
And it's really interesting. I think it's also great for the team that I don't have team members or as many team members constantly on the road, year in and year out. I mean, granted, there's folks that love that. I started my career as a roadie, and that is a lifestyle, but it can be tough. And so being able to engage with that flexibility, have people build their own effectively broadcast compounds from home is really exciting, and it's something we're really proud of. But it also leans into the audience. If we're broadcasting to a digital space, I don't think it's good enough to send a 4:3 video or a
Mhm.
16:9 video to Twitch or TikTok or a 16:9 video to TikTok. You've got to lean into that format. It's not good enough to make a crop. You
Right.
need to engage with that format, engage with that medium, and have people that are native to that medium engage with it. And that's how we work forward.
Very cool. All right, Lewis, before we let you go, obviously 2024 is pretty much right around the corner here. So there's not too much time left in this year. But what are some things, whether it's, some of the key topics that we've talked about that you're focusing on, AI, the cloud, VR, anything else? What's something that you've kind of creatively got your eye on as we kind of look
Well,
ahead
I
towards
love this
2024?
idea, and I leaning back into our AI fan focused highlights,
Mhm.
and this is something where, look, I have a rich digital trail. I'm a person who constantly clicks yes, accept cookies, yes, use my data, just
Yeah.
stop sending me stuff I don't want, please.
Mhm.
Um, Thank you, B&H, for all of those ads that you put on the side of my screens. They're very helpful. Same to you, Garmin. Anyway, the point I'm making in that context is I love this idea, and I have this belief that in the next year or so, 29 sports leagues, their rights come up for renewal. And I think there's an opportunity, and I think we'll start to see sports groups and sports leagues start realizing that their fans are divided by far more than just where they live and their geographics. And the way rights have been, frankly, not frankly, have been broken up prior to now has been literally based upon either where you live or the literal size of your screen. I
Mhm.
remember working on a project where it was like, you have the 6-inch screen light rights. And you're like, what? Why is that how we're that's not what viewers give a shit about. That's not what
Right.
viewers care. Viewers don't care what size screen. And so I think there's an opportunity that leagues and rights holders are going to lean into where you start thinking about maybe we should broadcast to those affinity groups and sell those affinity rights. I know that, like, for example, if the Chiefs started selling Taylor Swift rights to the Chiefs, like, that would sell very, very well.
Mhm.
And so it's this opportunity where your for a rights holder, the surface area that a rights holder can have now should no longer be divided by home and away. We should be able to look at how you could sell the sneakerhead rights, you could sell different music affinity group rights, different fandom rights. What's it like to watch a sports game from the Marvel perspective? That sounds fascinating and sounds interesting. And in the same way you see that happening and that fragmentation of rights happening within the podcast space very clearly, and it happened very aggressively and very quickly, I think we'll start to see that in sports as more sports get into digital spaces. And particularly as, frankly, the terrestrial commercial rights of some of these sports start to erode, more and more sports are being broadcast on streaming platforms. The opportunity for sports groups and for rights holders and, frankly, production groups to deliver, is there a world where there's 200 different broadcasts of the Super Bowl next year? It makes sense. Like, yeah, that's incredible. And I think that's the world that we're walking into as we deliver into these digital spaces. And it's something I'm really excited about.
Man, fascinating possibilities heading into the new year. He is Lewis Smithingham. He is the SVP of Innovation and Creative Solutions at Media.Monks, one of SVG's newest sponsors. We're thrilled to have him on board. You can learn more about them if you're interested at media.monks.com. Lewis, happy there. You read that SVG article in 2020 because it's awesome to have you guys aboard. Thanks a lot for taking the time.
Thank you.